the way. All right, so this month for Tech Tuesday, we're going to talk about TOSIBOX, which is our VPN offering, and it's something that I think super simple to set up, just as secure as any other VPN, and there's no monthly recurring fees. We'll get into some more of that stuff, but I wanted to, before we get into the product and stuff, sort of talk about why VPNs are important in this day and age. You can no longer do the port forwarding thing that we used to do. It's just not secure. And a really good demonstration of why it isn't secure, and if you've been to Niagara Summit or been in a James Johnson Vicon Pro class, you've probably seen this before. But Shodan.io is the website, is essentially a Google for devices on the internet. So if Google's for content, Shodan is for devices. And what you can do is type in something like Niagara and see a whole bunch of Niagara devices that are exposed on the internet. And with older versions, you can also see what version of Niagara they're running, which means that you can find out what the vulnerabilities are, and I wouldn't be surprised if a vast majority of these devices that you can see out here are probably on factory credentials. And this is bad. So if someone can find that you're out there and you're using a specific version, they can find out those vulnerabilities and they can most likely get in if they want to, because as you can see, these are they're older versions. I mean, one of them in here I saw was R2. So the option today, or the way that things should be done today, is with something like TOSIBOX. So let me make this full screen. TOSIBOX, sorry, I've been pronouncing it all wrong and I haven't been able to change my brain. So it's TOSIBOX, and we'll skip through some of these things. So there are a bunch of options for VPN out there. I'm sure a lot of you guys have been given VPN clients by big sites that you might be working on. That's great because you don't have to do anything, right? You just get the client, and the IT department at the site will give you an IP address for your devices, and you're good to go. But the back-end work to get those types of VPNs set up is a major hassle. Let me get this out of the way. And that's these guys here. So they take a long time to get set up. They're expensive because you're working with these really big IT companies, and there's a lot of configuration involved, which means that there's human error possibilities. Then you also have to manage software, which means there's vulnerability risk.
Some still use those little code generator little devices that you have to type in whatever it says on the display.
Yep. And then there's also options that I'm sure some guys use with Cradlepoint routers, where you plug in your USB cellular modem into them, and you can get out into your site. And most of the times, I think, at least what I've seen of guys doing it, you're still doing port forwarding to make that happen. You're not using any VPN options that are available in some of those routers. But they're there. But again, there's more setup required for them. And lately there have been some cloud options for doing VPN stuff, and that's this third category here. Again, there's a good bit of setup that's required, and there's ongoing costs typically. So you got to pay monthly based on the number of sites that you may have or devices that you're connecting in. And there's still setup stuff. Plus, you're going through the cloud, which means that your data isn't private, right? It's going through somebody else's server, and you most of the time don't know what's going on our servers. So TOSIBOX sort of fixes all these issues. Super easy to set up, pretty infinitely scalable. There's no ongoing costs. You just pay for the devices themselves, and it's super easy to set up, so there's not much in the way of human error risk. Vulnerabilities, they're using the standards for VPN security, basically what OpenVPN uses as far as like their back-end encryption. And they have some secret sauce that makes some other features that we'll talk about later work, where there's a server involved from TOSIBOX, but your data doesn't go through that server. It just uses that server to sort of figure out where devices are on the internet. So if we go, oops. All right. So, like we talked about with some of the other stuff, this is the other guys, and then this is TOSIBOX over here, or TOSIBOX, sorry. So it's a point-to-point system. When you plug in your key into your computer, which we'll get into the hardware stuff in a little bit, your computer is talking directly to your lock or your router in the field. You're not going through a server, you're just using a server to sort of get you two hooked up to each other, matchmakers, essentially. There's no specialized knowledge or anything required. It's literally, the setup is super, super simple. But you do have some options if you want to do some additional configuration. It's not necessary, but the options are there should you need to use them. Data is yours because you're not going through the cloud, and you don't have to do any port forwarding or anything like that, so those security concerns are addressed. And then there's some nice features about TOSIBOX too that a lot of VPNs, or I would say 99% of VPNs, don't do themselves, and that is you don't need a fixed IP address or public IP address. Because of the way that they use their matchmaking server to get you hooked up with your device in the field, you don't need a public IP. It will figure out where the device is in the field and get you connected. Like we talked about before, you're connecting point to point. You're also using multi-factor authentication. Because TOSIBOX requires a key, which is a physical device or a licensed piece of software in their soft key case, you have that's your first factor of authentication. And then your second factor would be you have to punch in a password still. So when I show you later, when you plug a key into your computer, you have to have the physical key, but then in order to connect to any sites, you have to plug in your password as well. So you get the benefits of two-factor there. And then your RSA key is that sort of standard security encryption stuff. Other things that are nice with TOSIBOX is there's no special ports required. You don't need to have the IT guys forward a port to your TOSIBOX in the field. So long as where you're plugging the TOSIBOX into their network can access Google, you can use TOSIBOX. So it uses an outbound connection, not inbound. So 9 times out of 10, the IT department is not really going to be doing anything with outbound traffic. It's typically the inbound stuff that they're stopping. So the TOSIBOX will work in those cases. And because of that, it works with existing firewalls. You don't have to worry about having IT guys set up any additional rules or anything like that. Proxy server stuff, you can set that up as well. And because of the nature of the way that you set up a lock, you can also use them with the USB cellular modems, just like a Cradlepoint. And a little bit more on the infrastructure stuff. You can do layer 2 or layer 3 connections. You can stay continuously connected to your devices out in the field. There's audit trails built in, and you can really scale this up as big as you want. You can have your TOSIBOX routers talking to other TOSIBOX routers, so you could have multiple buildings in a campus and have them securely talking to each other over the internet. Or buildings across the country that are talking to the same supervisor that you want to bring in together, you can do that too. So this is the hardware. These are what they call their locks, which are they're routers essentially. 3 different flavors, and you can see the major differences are the VPN capability in each. So obviously the Lock 100 is your cheapest option, the 500 is your most expensive. Depending on the number of connections that you need to your lock will sort of decide which lock you want to use. In our case, we're typically not putting through much traffic, so I typically recommend the 200. It's a nicer build quality than the 100. It's like solid aluminum, and you can put it on a DIN rail as well. And they all have the ability to use the cellular. So you can see on the Lock 100, there's a USB port here. On the 200, the USB port's on this back side. You can't see it. And then the 500, the 500i actually has a built-in LTE modem with dual SIM slots. So you could actually have 2 cellular providers and have it roll over to your backup if you wanted to, if it was like a mission-critical site. And this is the key that I was talking about. This is the piece that you plug into your computer in order to see your locks and connect to them. There's also a soft key, which is just a piece of software that gets licensed against another key in the field, and we'll talk about that infrastructure stuff a little bit later. And there's also the option to use a mobile client. So every one of your keys includes a license for a mobile client so that you can access all of your sites remotely from your phone or your iPad or whatever mobile device you're using. And the keys can be licensed for additional mobile clients as well, if you wanted to license, multiple phones or whatever. And how it works. So, probably take a step back even from this. They mention a master key here. So the idea would be that you would have a key that you would put away and use it only to set up all of your locks. So as you can see here, your lock and your key get matched together simply by plugging in your key into the lock, leaving it plugged in for 10 seconds. They'll exchange their certificates, and that's it. That's literally all you have to do to get them set up and talking to each other. From there, though, you can do some interesting things if you use this master key concept, and we'll get to that on another slide. But so all you do is you plug in that master key into the lock, 10 seconds, connect your locks anywhere in the world you want to, connect any devices you want to into them. It works exactly like a regular router. So you have your WAN side and your LAN side, and then you plug in your key into your devices, again, anywhere in the world, and then you can connect to your locks as you need to. So there's a lot of scalability options here, especially if you use this master key concept. So you can see on this piece here, you have the ability to give permissions to keys if they're set up as a sub-key underneath a master. So you would set up your master key so that it's married with all of your locks. Then you would set up a sub-key under that master, and you can set permissions to say, okay, I want this user to only have access to this specific site, whereas this guy can have access to everything. And from there, you can also do stuff like set up keys so that they can only get into specific locks, and they're not even underneath the master. And you can do, it's on another slide, but you can do, like we said before, lock-to-lock communications as well. Is there any questions? Like, this is sort of, this master key concept is relatively simple, but it's kind of hard to understand at first without like touching it. Does anyone have any questions about any of this stuff so far? Kind of.
Yeah, I do, Matt.
Yep, go for it.
Master key versus software key, the same kind of functionality, or are we talking you should have a physical master key always?
Yes. So the master, you have to have at least one physical key. The only way, I think there might be a way that you could do it without a key, but really the only way that you can marry a key to a lock is if you have a physical key. So
okay, via the USB.
You want to have, say that again?
Through the USB port on the lock.
Correct. Like this guy here.
Okay.
So my suggestion is always, you want to have a physical master key, USB, and then a key for each one of your guys. Whether that's a physical key or a soft key, it doesn't matter, but that master key has to be a physical key.
And then you'd want to lock that key away once you set it up.
Right.
Matt, the TOSIBOX guy also said it might not hurt to have a backup key.
Correct. Yeah, especially once you get these things.
Lock it in somebody's drawer.
Right. If you get these, if you get your network's really big and you have a bunch of locks and you've got stuff talking to other stuff, they have the ability where you can make a backup of your master key, and so that you can keep it away, locked in a safe or a drawer or wherever you want. Can they
Another thing that's nice about this is as the admin, if you have techs come and go, you can easily turn them off. You don't have to collect their key back.
Exactly.
Last 2 minutes.
Yeah, because of the nature of the sub keys and the permissions that you can give to guys, you can revoke those permissions if you need to, and you don't even need to have physical access to the key either. So you need physical access to the sub key to initially set it up, but once it's set up, you can change permissions on the fly. And you don't have to have.
But I don't necessarily need the physical sub key. I'm envisioning, most of the stuff runs through my office anyway. So I buy the TOSIBOX from you guys. I stick the master key in it. I set it up, and I give permissions to my guys' field laptops that have software keys.
Correct. Yeah, and you can change that.
Okay, and if I lose a laptop, it gets stolen, the employee leaves, or for whatever reason, it's a simple enough to go and turn it off.
Yeah, so that's actually the nice feature. That's the nice feature of the soft keys is not only can you revoke permissions to that laptop of the guy who left or whatever, you get that license back. So you could use that license on someone else's computer. Whereas if it was a hard key and the guy ran off with the key, you're out of luck there. You can revoke his access, but you don't get the key back to use for somebody else. Potentially.
Okay, and then you always do run the risk of losing the physical key.
Right.
Can't say I haven't lost the care dongle once or twice.
Right.
But if the guy loses a key, they still, somebody picks one up off the road, they can't use it because it's the two-factor built-in authorization. Right. They still have to have the password, so it's still safe.
Yeah. Okay. The other nice thing about the physical key is that it's not attached to one laptop. So you could, move a key between guys, or if you're going between different computers, it's a nice option to have there too. So there's trade-offs on whichever way you go, soft key or hard key.
Okay, but you have to purchase a key for each connecting device. For every device that's going to connect. Okay, and I get
for every device that's going to connect remotely.
Okay, and the same applies for a Jace, and like if you were doing a Jace to Jace thing or a Jace supervisor.
That would
remote supervisor.
If you're doing a supervisor, yes, you could do it that way. Typically, though, on sites you're going to want to use a lock to do that, so that you're not relying on a piece of software or a USB key. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
So when you're first getting into this,
yep,
and you don't want to go, I'm assuming the master key approach has the added cost of buying the master key or the second key.
Yep.
If you start with just a regular key and a regular,
you're totally good.
Base building, simple entry-level stuff.
Yep.
And then later you want to say, okay, I'm going to go with the master key. Can you reconfigure your existing key?
It would it would basically be your key that you have now, that one key that you bought, become your master.
Oh, all right, cool.
That's it. Yeah, because they call it a master key, but it's just a key.
Okay.
There's nothing special about it. You're not buying a special version of the key. It's literally just a key, and they call it.
Your key's the master key.
Yeah, my key that you have right now is the master key.
Is that the configuration key, Matt?
No.
The TBC-K1?
No.
Okay.
The only physical key that you need to purchase is the TBK2, I believe, is the part number for it.
What's the availability on
TBK2?
We have stock.
stock?
Yeah, we have stock.
Do they need to be turned on or activated?
The only thing that needs to be activated would be a soft key.
Okay.
You could walk out of here today.
Yeah, you
That's
could.
what I'm looking for, because
They're sitting on the shelf.
Yep.
All right.
Right out there.
I have an unconfigured Cloud VPN router in my car.
There you go. All right, so any other questions before we move along?
And I guess you already mentioned it, literally, you don't need to configure anything in that building network to get this to talk through.
Yeah.
Pretty much any network to work on.
Yeah. And then the only caveat, and this is a good thing that this works this way, is there's no port forwarding available in these locks. You can't port forward. So if you put devices behind a lock, in order to get to them on the WAN side, the other side of the lock, you need to have a key. There's no way to port forward.
So for a Jace with 2 ports, the client wants access to it. They're going to get the one port, and if I want remote access, I put in one of these and I go in through the other port.
Correct.
You just don't want to go into a building and just plug into their network and expose their network. We want to let their work with their IT department to get the approval to put this on their network, unless you're doing something separate. Because he's going to find out. He'll know.
We'll see.
Hey, Matt.
Yes.
Okay, so did I understand it correctly? You're saying, okay, based on what the slide you have up here, I got a TOSIBOX on my site, and I've got 3 Jaces. Because they have different IP addresses, I don't necessarily need to worry about port forwarding because I can make the connections through the TOSIBOX.
I'm not sure I'm understanding the question.
Okay, I'm sitting here in my office. I'm connecting to a remote site that actually has 3 Jaces. So what do I need to configure to have that remote access to each of the 3 Jaces? Do I need a lock for each Jace?
No,
or do I need a lock
for the network?
It
depends on the network architecture at the remote site. So if all three JACEs are on the same physical network out there, you would need a lock, and those three JACEs would plug into the LAN side of the lock.
Okay, and then I just access the IP address that I need.
Right. Yeah. So you would, when you plug in the key into your computer, you're essentially jumping on their network wherever the lock is. That's your portal into their network, and then you would just hit the IP addresses like you normally would to get into the JACEs.
Okay, and because I kind of didn't clearly hear what Frank had mentioned or someone else had mentioned. So now I'm in a building that it's not my network that I created. It's a building network.
Mm-hmm.
So I need to work with the IT department, tell them I want to put this box on there. And I guess, how's that work with the end user accessing locally versus me accessing it remotely?
So you have a couple options. So before I say those options, there's nothing that the IT guys most likely are going to need to do for you to put in that lock on the site, right? You really just want to let them know that you're installing a VPN so that you can get to your devices. And there's all kinds of security white paper things that TOSIBOX has that you can give to those guys and to make them feel warm and fuzzy about how secure it is. But there's nothing that they need to do to make this work. So long as you can get out to the internet, you should be fine. Now, I forget what your other part of the question was.
Okay, so I'm doing that, but I'm jumping onto I'm putting this VPN device on their network.
Right. Their users getting onto the devices.
Yes.
I think that's where you would go in through the second port.
Yeah, you could use the secondary port on the JACEs and go in that way. That's the way we've had the lock set up in our building before, is we have the primary port plugged into our building network so that everyone here locally can get to it, and then the secondary port was plugged into the lock so that remotely we could get to it.
Okay, so in that case, I would have to build my own network between my JACEs.
Yeah.
Correct. If you went that way.
Let's say my secondary port network.
Right. Or you'd have to get 3 locks.
Okay.
Where their whole network is on the LAN side, which you don't want to do.
Okay.
Your other option, though, is you can make the locks turn into what they call client mode, I believe it is, where the lock no longer serves the functionality of a router. It's literally just an endpoint for a VPN, and the existing network handles everything else. So you can think of it as essentially just a portal into their existing network. IT guys might not like that so much because you potentially have access to their entire network.
Yep. Well, that's kind of why I'm asking,
Yeah, but that's an option. You can definitely work it that way, and that way you don't have to worry about IP addressing or anything like that yourself. Their network would handle that. It's literally just a secure tunnel for you to get into their network.
Okay. So, I mean, the secondary port sounds kind of the way I think that we probably end up approaching it, to have the least amount of interaction with their IT people.
Well, and depending on the number of people who need to have access to the system, you could also just get them a soft key as well, or a physical key. That option is still there, even though you're you're kind of local to the network.
Okay.
You have a couple options.
All right. Because, I mean, I'm just thinking about where we're going with all this IT-based stuff, all the IP, you know, the new controllers, everything, you know, or we kind of typically build our own networks anyway, and then just tell them to connect here.
Right.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Alrighty.
Could we put it on their network as a client and then use a VLAN to isolate us from their network?
Say that again?
Could we put it on their network as a client, but then use a VLAN to isolate us from their network?
Yep. Yeah, that the VLAN, that would have to be set up on their end though, because the lock at that point isn't going to serve any of that functionality. So literally just a port into the network essentially, or a tunnel into the network. So if they have a VLAN set up for all of your devices, then they could make it so that your lock that's set up as a client is on that VLAN and you're good to go. You're isolated.
Okay, so that's sounds like a real good solution there.
But
if we're dealing with a network.
Yeah, but it requires you to have an IT department that's going to work with you on something like that.
Okay.
But I agree that's probably the best option. Then the IT department can decide who has access to that VLAN, etc.
All right.
All right. Yeah, so it's got the typical features that a router will have, DHCP built in, MAC filtering. You can do layer 2 or layer 3 connections, static routing, PoE, VLANs, as we were just talking about. If you're using it as the router functionality, you get the ability to set VLANs and stuff. And this sort of just gives you a visual representation of what you could potentially be doing with the infrastructure of how your keys are set up. So you could have, your master key that has access to everything, but then you could have sub keys for your customers who only have access to certain sites, as well as soft keys that do the same sort of thing. But then they also have, if it'll go to the next slide. Stupid thing. Then they also have some higher end features like their virtual central lock, which you could install on one of your servers, that will get you access to all of your locks at the same time. So you could potentially have this virtual central lock set up in your building and have access to all of your sites at the same time and not have to worry about using keys and stuff when you're in your building.
Is that different than just the software key?
Yes, because it basically has the functionality of like the lock and the key in one, and you could break out what locks you want to have access to or have them on separate VLANs. There's a lot of additional functionality for configuration. I can't say that I've played with one yet because you have to have a pretty big infrastructure of locks and keys to make it worthwhile. But if you did, it makes a lot of sense. And then same sort of thing, you could run that in the cloud as well, your own personal cloud.
Does this support Active Directory for authentication?
The virtual central lock, maybe, but the just regular lock and key would not. And then this sort of shows you what kind of thing you could do if you used a virtual central lock. You could move things around into different VLANs and have a bunch of different subkeys that connect to your virtual central lock, which then connects to a wide variety of locks that are actually out in the field. A lot more flexibility with the network architecture when you go that route. But obviously it requires a lot more hardware and setup, and it's not quite as easy as just the lock and key thing. And that's really it. They've got a bunch of guys using it in the field, but so just as a quick demonstration, I'm gonna plug key into my machine here. And this isn't my key, it's Frank's key. My key normally pops up with the software automatically. Yours does not for some reason.
You need the super secret handshake to make it do it.
I don't know why it's not coming up now.
It worked when I gave it to you.
Come on.
I saw it pop up in the corner when you first plugged it in.
I know.
So the software is available,
Software comes on the key.
comes on the key.
Yeah, or you can download it if you're using a soft key. Yeah. Let's try this again. Of course, I pulled the key out and it opens. There we go. That's normally what happens. So you plug the key in, you get prompted for your key password, and it helps if you click in the box. It'll connect out to the internet, see what locks you have access to, and give you a list of them. Now, our demo lock is...
Sales borrowed it.
Sales borrowed it, yeah.
Back.
So you can see right now it doesn't have an internet connection to the lock, so I can't connect to it. But if I could, literally all you do is hit connect here, and you're connected to your lock, and you can get to all your devices that are on it.
That's complicated.
Yes, very complicated. And so you also have a little bit of configuration options for mobile clients. It's literally, you have your key in, you authenticate it like we just did. You go to devices, manage keys, do an add new, call it whatever you want. I can call it Matt's iPhone. You would install the app on your phone, choose what locks you want the mobile client to have access to, scan this QR code with the app on your phone,
That's difficult.
and done.
That's how that works, okay.
That's it.
You said 5 people, take a picture of it.
Well, I canceled it out, so they won't have access to anything. And you can see, because Frank is actually a sub key, he's a sub to my master key, and that's what this is showing here. The way setting up a sub key works is identical to the way we just did the mobile client thing, except the only difference being, that you would plug in the sub key into your computer instead of doing the QR code step. So you'd have your master key into the computer, and then it would say plug in the sub key. You plug that in, say what locks you want to have access to, done. And then you only do that initially. So once that initial piece is done, you could come back into the list and change your permissions around if you wanted to.
So
How does it work with the software key? Matt?
The exact same way. The only difference being you don't have a physical key to plug in, so you would just open up the software and connect to your devices as you wanted to. You still need to plug in a password that you set up when you first install, but that's it.
Well,
Yeah, the only
I mean,
difference
if
there
it,
is you don't have to plug in.
I've got the master key and I'm looking at my software like you are now, and I want to
You want to give
make
it
a
permissions and set it
laptop.
up. So
I'm
the
sorry?
way that works is the way that works is your master key is what's licensed for the soft keys. So in order to use a soft key, you have to have at least one physical key, and that physical key gets licensed for however many soft keys you want. And the setup process is very similar to the way the mobile client is set up. So you go through, it'll give you a code that you would plug into your computer that you want to use the soft key on, and then you give it the permissions that you want it to have, and that's it.
Okay.
Yeah, the trick there is the licensing portion at the beginning. That's something that TOSIBOX has to do, is they have to get your key number and then license a sub key onto that key, or a soft key, excuse me.
So after you get this all set up, you fire up your supervisor or your workbench.
Yep.
And you want to connect to a Jace that's on a lock.
Yep.
Somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
I'm assuming the IP address of the devices on that lock show up. So you
Yeah. So the easiest way to do that would be to have your Jaces set up for DHCP so that they get the IP address from the lock. And when they do that, when you connect to the lock, it'll give you a list of all the devices that have DHCP underneath it.
Oh.
So it's even simpler. So, and the
How
nice,
do you identify the Jace?
the Jace, if you set the host name in the Jace,
Oh.
it'll show the host name and the IP address.
Oh.
So it's kind of, it's doing the documentation work almost for you for each of your sites, network-wise. Any other questions?
Yeah, Matt, when you plug this key in, I see that you need to connect to your lock. As many of us do, we're working at an office, and I'm constantly logging into customer sites.
Mm-hmm.
Is this something where like every day I'd have to, or once until I turn my computer off or unplug the key, I just go in, I click all my sites, or have to do it individually every time? Or
That's kind of up to you. There's really no hard and fast rule for that. I mean, if you're going to be in and out of it all day, you could connect in the morning and then disconnect at night. If you're just going to be in it for a couple of minutes, I would say, if you can, just connect and then disconnect afterwards. But that's really up to you. I haven't seen any issues with being connected all day. But obviously, it's going to be better if you don't have to be connected all day. If there's no reason for you to be connected all day, shouldn't be.
How about, are there limits on the amount of outgoing connections you can have? Or is it just the locks are limited to the number of incoming concurrent?
I'm sure there's some sort of, I mean, the problem is it depends, right? Because it's very dependent on your computer. If you're connecting to a bunch of different sites, I would guess you'll probably be okay. For the number of sites that you'd have to be in the hundreds of sites, I would guess, from your PC to another lock to see any sorts of issues, because the locks themselves can handle like 50 for the higher end ones at a time, and your computer is significantly faster than the lock is.
So
Okay.
Matt, couldn't
Provide-
they
that other
use
key anyway.
the central lock if once they got numerous customer sites on there, they could use a central lock to make it easier to go
Yes.
to each individual
Yes.
site?
Yep. Yeah, that's the intent of the central lock, is to take that burden off of your computer and put it onto a server essentially in your building. But you're talking a good bit of locks out in the field before you get to that point, I would say. But yeah, that's its intended purpose, is for the virtual central lock and the central lock.
Okay, so you don't have to keep going back and forth and connecting and disconnecting.
Right. The idea of the central lock is essentially that it has a persistent connection to all of your locks out in the field. And depending on how you set up your network, you could have access to all of them when you're connected to your network at your office where the central lock is.
Okay. Yeah, 'cause I wasn't necessarily envisioning tomorrow. I was envisioning down the road where, I've got all kinds of job stuff, having to keep going back and forth. Okay. Do you know what's the software key part number?
That I don't know off the top of my head.
Paul, do you have that handy?
Yeah, I got it right here. Let me look for a second. You're talking about the soft key license?
Yeah, is that the SKL1?
Yeah.
One piece software.
SKL1.
Yeah, that sounds right.
So basically to get one connection to one site, you're talking $700 range, because you need a lock 100 and a key. You want to buy two keys, you have a master key that you can hide, but it's fairly economical to get started.
Okay.
Yeah, no.
The mobile clients are very inexpensive.
Okay, because I'm envisioning that the minute I embark down this road, I really got to get my field laptops have to have keys, because they often remote into sites for support.
Sure.
Hey, Kevin, are you
So-
still on? I have a customer down south that I know they bought one. I didn't know exactly what they did. Kevin, can you share any of your experiences so far, or was that Matt that bought that? I can't remember who bought it.
No, I've got one in use. There's only really the two of us, me and Matt, that access it. We've both got keys. The soft keys work well as well. Good, easy system. That's about all I can really tell you about it.
All right.
Any comment? I mean, what are you guys doing right now for this kind of, to secure to harden your Niagara systems?
Well, I have been saying I need to start putting VPNs in for about 5-6 months now. I've been thinking a lot about it. That's what I've been doing. We just do the standard, make sure we don't have any regular credentials. I encourage IT departments to put us behind VPNs and, to implement their own security protocols. But we've not embraced or ventured into providing VPNs for customers, and this looks like it makes it easy to make that happen sooner rather than later.
Right.
The the other thing we can do besides this Tech Tuesday is you can get with your local Brody rep, and we can schedule 1 hour net labs directly with the TOSIBOX guys. So if you want to get more of your guys from your company involved, and they can answer questions specifically how you typically do things. It's pretty easy for us to set up.
Okay, we'll keep that in mind.
Now, the one thing I guess that I think is worthwhile working with as reference, if nothing else, is the Niagara hardening guide. So I'm not sure how many of you actually have reviewed that document or even follow it. But it gives you a good list of things to do to harden, lock down, secure your Niagara systems. So I'm not sure how many out there have actually looked through that guide or do some of the things that are in that guide.
I have. It's just the VPN was like the biggest piece that
Right.
I keep talking about doing and never seem to get around to doing.
Still dabbling with SSL certificates.
Yeah. Fun stuff.
Got a couple set up. So
That's definitely another one. Probably another topic.
Certificates.
Yeah. That's
Many of you successfully gone through and generated certificates?
and gotten them signed.
You're not just generating, right?
Yeah. Because the signing part is
I'm ahead of the curve.
You're going to lead the next Tech Tuesday, Ron.
Okay.
Matt,
Yes.
the lock that you would put on a DIN rail, is that 120 volt powered?
That is a good question. I don't believe, no. It can be PoE powered. I'd have to look at the spec sheet. I don't exactly know what power it is.
It says DC input 8 to 27,
There you go.
PoE 8 to 27.
It comes with a wall transformer.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we at Brody have been putting together a security enclosure to house a Jace that has a UPS in it that we could mount a TOSIBOX in behind a locked door. It could be one package that we put together for sites. So we're thinking about offering that as well.
Any other thoughts, comments, questions?
When will this become obsolete?
When will what become obsolete?
The TOSIBOX. 5 years, 10 years.
They'll have the 600 and the 1000 and
I would.
Backwards compatible.
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't really have an answer for it.
Yeah, I don't expect the answer.
Yeah. Because really the key is their matchmaking piece. That's sort of what makes everything happen. I would say if it didn't rely on that, then it's
And the trend of IT departments to open up outbound IT communication.
I think that isn't going to change because it's really they give the outbound ports that they use, and for the most part it's like 80, which is what you use in a browser to look at web pages. And unless you're on some super secure facility, most likely you're not going to get this on there anyways.
Right.
80 is going to be open because people like to use the internet.
I found that out.
Yeah.
I found that about people.
Yeah. but I think the trend of VPNs is only going to get bigger. Like the idea of opening ports and stuff like that is just, that's going away, and I think it will go away quickly. And your only other option after that is the VPN.
Just, I guess, even, we go back a level, any, just general questions, comments, anything come up, or anything you want to discuss? Future topics of discussion for Tech Tuesday?
Hierarchies?
Yeah, so we're piggybacking on that a
Working
little
on
bit.
that, Matt?
I'm working on a new demo for our building, and with that, I'm trying to use everything that's in the box, Niagara 4 wise, up to 4.7. So once I'm finished that, which should hopefully be in the next month or so I don't want to say for March, but maybe for April, I'll do a sort of behind the scenes look at everything that I have set up in it, because I'm already dabbling a little bit with the hierarchy stuff, did a lot of the tagging stuff already. Responsive PX stuff, which I don't think anyone is really using yet, but it's there now, and it's pretty nice. Those kinds of features, sort of the bleeding edge features, system database, all that stuff. The features that you're most likely going to be touching more as you get more Niagara Edge devices installed.
Okay. And when you said when you do the hierarchies, are you, if you recall, Matt, you and I had a conversation. The way Tritium did it for their one demo is a little different than a standard hierarchy.
So a lot of the hierarchy stuff in the playing that I've done relies on your tagging and doing some custom tagging to get what you want, which means, making your own tag dictionary, adding your own tags and relationships so that you can get the hierarchy that you're looking for. So like one of the hierarchies that I built for the demo is to break out all the controllers that are installed by manufacturer. And the way that I'm doing that is I've made my own tag called manufacturer, and it's a string, and I'm just putting in, Honeywell, JCI, the name of the manufacturer in that tag, and then my hierarchy is grouping them based on that tag. So all of the things that are tagged JCI are getting put in a folder, and so on and so on.
Okay, yeah, because I was able to work through that after our discussion. It's just that I seem to have mixed results when things look like they should work, but they don't, and then it's really I stumble through it and sort of get what I want, but I don't have a good understanding of how I'm getting there.
Yeah, I can relate to that because the documentation, in my opinion, doesn't have enough examples of like practical uses.
Right.
Yes. So it's a lot of like guessing and checking. Is this an inbound relationship or an outbound relationship? That sort of stuff. So hopefully once I'm done this demo, I'll have a better grasp on the practical uses of it, and I can share that with everyone.
Okay. And because that all ties, I'm assuming that all ties in with the system database and
Yes.
ultimately not having to build graphics for supervisors, which I can do reasonably quickly, but it's still, if I can eliminate all that work, I always like to have the graphics in the Jace as a fallback anyway.
Yeah, so that's the way I'm trying to operate now, is I'm working everything in our Jace here, and then once I'm done, I'll pull everything up to the supervisor through system database, and I shouldn't really have to do anything else with the supervisor. It'll pull up all my PXs as virtuals, points as virtuals, all that jazz.
Okay, well that's my goal, so I look forward to that tech Tuesday and Wednesday if it has to be 2 days.
Yeah,
I'll sit in for 2 days.
I would say look for that April.
Okay. Because it's probably the most frustrating part.
I might have some written documentation and stuff like that done prior. That would be up on VP Tech Center, but the full demo of, everything behind the scenes, let's pencil that in for April.
Okay. I look forward to it.
All right, I guess that wraps up this month's session, unless somebody's got something else they want to bring up. I want to thank everybody for attending, and thanks to Matt for putting this together and going through that.
Thank you,
If you have any other additional questions, let us know. And this recording will get put up on
VP Tech Center later today.
Sounds good.
Have a great day.
Okay, thanks, guys.
Thanks, Matt.
Yep.